Good afternoon to you. 4:06. It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. We're live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio having the crucial conversations that Erie needs. And today we're talking tariffs and their impact on Erie business. And with us from Logistics Plus Customs Broker Solutions, Gretchen Blough. She is the Customs Brokerage Manager. She runs the department. Gretchen, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Alrighty, we're a family show. We like the origin stories. Tell us a little bit about how you came up and how did you get into this line of work?
Well, I went back to school in my 30s to get my bachelor's degree, and I interned at Logistics Plus. My major at Edinburgh University was business administration with a concentration in management information systems. So while I was interning in the IT department, there was an opening at GE Transportation in the Customs Compliance Department. Jim Berlin asked if I would like the job, and I went, well, I don't really know anything about that. And he said, well, it's a bunch of computer stuff because you have to pull bills of material and import and export data, and you'll learn the legal stuff. It'll be fine. So
Wow.
I was graduating. I wanted a job, and I said, okay, sure. So
when Jim Berlin calls, you answer, right?
Exactly. So I ended up pulling data for their duty drawback program, which duty drawback is when you import component parts. This is a really simplified version.
Sure.
And pay duties and tariffs on those parts. You keep track of that. You run it through your bill of material. And if you export a locomotive, then you can get a refund on the duties that were paid on those imported
That
parts.
is a huge part of this conversation, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Because, you know, with all the talk about not locomotives, but automobiles, people need to understand that for the most part, parts are coming from all over the world.
Yes, because, I mean, a lot of people say, well, buy American. Well, a lot of people do buy American, but there's a lot of foreign components that go in American products. And, you know, that's important to realize.
And products that we make go around the world.
Exactly.
I think about Bliley, for example.
Exactly.
Which now Kyocera. I mean, like, gosh, those chips are getting everywhere.
Right. And one thing is with these new China tariffs, with the China-Hong Kong tariff of 20% that just was enacted, duty drawback doesn't apply to that. So you can't get that 20% back even when you export it at this point.
That's a bummer.
Yes, it is.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's how you got into this. And again, how long have you been in this space?
Well, I've been with Logistics Plus for 18 years.
Wow.
I got my customs brokerage license 11 years ago, and we started doing in-house customs brokerage because you have to be a licensed broker to have a customs brokerage business. You have to take a test that when I took it, less than 4% of the people passed. It's an open book test. It sounds really easy. It's like a 3-hour open book test, but the book is 2 feet wide. So you need to know where to find it in the book really quickly.
Right.
So basically what the test is on is what you do every day. There's a 10-digit HTS, which is the harmonized tariff schedule, that is assigned to every commodity that is imported and exported for them. For that purpose too.
A harmonized tariff schedule.
Yes.
How many items would be categorized in that harmonized tariff schedule?
Well,
are we talking over 10,000?
Probably, yeah. I've never really counted them, but of that 2-foot book, this is probably a foot and a half.
So every little thing that you can think of is under a tariff schedule.
Right. Like everything from sugar to train parts to auto parts to steel to aluminum, anything you can think of, to computers, to toys.
Consumer products.
Yeah. So, like each piece and it's subdivided down like we won't get into shoes because shoes are really, really
like the shoes that you wear?
The shoes that you wear, like depending on what the sole is made out of. versus what the upper is made out of. That can have everything has a different classification in this harmonized tariff schedule.
And I would imagine the shoelaces too.
Well, the shoelaces don't really have a whole lot to do with it. It's just everything.
That's remarkable.
Yeah. So as an example, we'll take an easier example for furniture. Like wooden furniture is classified differently than steel furniture. And then it's subdivided into, like office furniture versus home furniture versus hotel furniture, that type of thing. So it goes out to 10 digits in the U.S. The first 6 digits, the reason it's called harmonized tariff schedule is all the countries in theory are harmonized up to the first 6 digits. After that, it's country specific, and some countries just stick with the first 6 digits. Some go to 8. We go to 10. Switzerland is a little over the top. It goes to 14. I'm of Swiss origin, and I can totally see that happening. Every little detail. When someone imports, we ask what an importer probably thinks are a bunch of stupid questions.
Yeah.
But we have to know this information in order to classify it. And the reason we have to classify it is that each one of those harmonized tariff schedule numbers has a duty assigned to it. Now, this is in addition, this is the regular duty.
A finished product of any degree could have literally 1,000 different duties in a under that tariff schedule.
Well, there's 97 chapters, and each one of those chapters, you start with one, and that is like really unfinished stuff like livestock and stuff like that.
Right.
And then it goes clear up to really manufactured goods like ballpoint pens and whatnot. So the higher the number, the more manufacturing or finishing goes into it. It depends on the commodity. Like Chapter 84 has a lot of machines in it. So yeah, there's a lot of different.
What about computers? I mean, like. Do you deal with that? Like a Dell computer, for example.
They're kind of funny because they're called automatic data processing machines
okay,
still. I
sure.
mean, just like a really fancy calculator type deal.
An iPhone, which is coming from
China mostly.
From China, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be in that chapter as well. So, yeah. Lots of
so
stuff
even though the design, for something like that, design was in California. They always say design in California, manufactured in China. That comes in, and that receiver of that iPhone, whether it's Apple or is it usually Apple that would pay the duty, or would it be the end retailer that would pay the duty?
It would usually be Apple that pays the duty because they would be the importer, and then they would pass any of those. It would factor into their landed costs to their retailers.
Okay, so we can transfer that kind of knowledge to what's happening here in Erie.
Right.
And even though, I mean, again, you had to learn to be a specialist in customs, as a customs broker. So this is what you do every day for 18 years. Was it ever, was it just kind of a matter of fact that, okay, I'm going to calculate these duties, give a number, times how many are in the box or the crate or the shipping container, and do a bill of lading of what the duty would cost. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that kind of how that works?
It's kind of how it works. What we do.
But I'm sure it's electronic, though.
Yes, everything's transmitted electronically to U.S. CBP, Customs and Border Protection, through their ACE system. What happens is we have our customers set up with a POA so that we can act with customs on their behalf, and then we put everything into our user interface with customs, and we take their commercial docs, we put those in our system in case customs wants to take a look at it.
Sure.
We put the value, we classify it and whatnot, and it gets calculated based on the duty rate. Everything pretty much. Most of the duty is calculated on a percentage. Sometimes you get it by, depending on the commodity, by kilogram or piece.
Interesting.
Or whatever. That's a little bit rare, but most of it's by percentage. So we put everything in there. We transmit what's called the entry to U.S. Customs. They either release it or they ask us for further information, and then our ops team moves it once it's released.
And so the custom gets a electronic funds transfer for each pallet or each
right. So
shipment.
The bill with customs has to be paid or authorized 10 days after the goods actually arrive. For some of our customers pay directly, and then it's kind of consolidated on a monthly basis per port, and then it's taken out of their bank account. For us, we pay a lot of times on an importer's behalf. If an importer doesn't import an awful lot, they'll have us pay on their behalf. We pay their duty on their behalf. Our payments are consolidated on a monthly basis as well. And
I should have looked this up, but do we have any idea, let's say, how much is paid to customs on an annual basis? I mean, I would imagine it's billions.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean,
but are we talking 100 billion?
Off the top of my head.
Yeah, right.
But
I mean, there's a lot of money transferring through your brokerage alone.
Right. We handle stuff like solar panels, which, the solar panels are quite valuable. And when when the duty and the tariffs are based on a percentage, and you've got a high value shipment, that's a lot of money. It's
a lot of money going right to customs. So they are used to making a pretty good chunk. And then however, it's all in the business plan of however they handle the cost of these duties. So what is it about? Well, maybe I should hold off on that question because I need to take my first break here. We're talking to Gretchen Blough. She is a customs brokerage manager and a licensed customs broker with Logistics Plus. And again, you have clients, I don't know, over 100 countries, right? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's offices for Logistics Plus all around the world. We're trying to understand the impact of the tariffs and as they would have an impact on importing and exporting here in Erie. And so stay with us here. We'll be back in about 2 minutes here on Talk Erie. Gretchen Blough is with us here from Logistics Plus. She's a customs brokerage manager, and she's teaching us about the business of tariffs. And so even though, Gretchen, billions and billions of dollars would go to customs, in the course of your career, it wasn't considered like, it was just part of doing business, right? You didn't really worry too much about how much the duties were or whatever. And you made a point here during the break, this USMCA pact that Donald Trump signed in his first term, that really made things a lot easier as a North American market, right?
Right. Well, that replaced NAFTA,
right?
Which we kind of say NAFTA 2.0 because NAFTA rolls off the tongue a little bit easier. So the USMCA actually let a little bit, in a lot of cases, a little bit more foreign content be allowed into the bill of material, because what happens when you have these free trade agreements, no matter what ones they are, whether it's the one with Korea or the one with Australia or whatnot, you have to look at the bills of material. You have to look at the originating versus non-originating content, and we'll use USMCA as an example. You have to have a certain percentage. There's a whole calculation that goes into it, but 50 or 60%, depending on how you calculate, of originating material, which means material that originates in the U.S., Mexico, or Canada. And so what the auto industry had been doing is they'll have something that is done on, a finishing process done on one part of the border, and then they move it to the other part of the border for another process to be done in the manufacturing of the vehicle, and then it comes back over. So if there's tariffs on certain things now, that makes that whole back and forth process a lot more complicated.
Yeah, the USMCA, if it did anything, is it created like all three countries as if they were one in many of these sectors. And so it was easy to cross borders.
You still had to file the entries, or whatnot to get it across the border, but it was just a record, you know what I mean? It wasn't where you were paying any kind of duties back and forth. So
gotcha. And so, duties were cost of doing business. Again, a lot of us like cheap goods. I always think about jeans. What would a pair of Levi's cost if they weren't made in Vietnam or Bangladesh? Right. I mean, I would love for them to still be made in Sacramento.
Yeah.
But that's not a thing, right?
Right. I mean, that's why like Doc Martens are made, in Vietnam now instead of the UK. And if you do buy the ones that are made in the UK, they cost an awful lot more.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's remarkable. All right. So fast forward to, let me just say this. You have a lot of clients in the Erie area, right? Because you're based in Erie. A lot of people look to you for importing and exporting. Can you just kind of be, in general terms, what are the kinds of goods that you're able to help with on that side of things?
Oh, sure. So I mean, there's a lot of nuts and bolts. There's a lot of parts for bigger machines that different companies put together.
Well, you think about like a place like Erie Press, right? They have these massive presses. Well, not every part is going to be made at that plant.
Exactly. So, replacement parts from overseas, that type of thing. We and it's not really just in the Erie area. I mean, we bring in a lot of commodities from all over the world, like wind turbines, solar panels, that type of stuff. We have an awful lot of commodities. Like we're kind of all over the board.
So parts, let's say, of a wind turbine would come from overseas, but some of it might be assembled in the States, right?
Yes.
And other parts in the States too.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So when these tariffs first came along in Trump's first term, we did have a lot of manufacturers that looked at trying to source them places other than China. And I'm not even talking domestically. I mean, like they did try domestically and no one was making them. So they tried other places, overseas. I had a case of one importer that tried to source something from Germany, and their competition actually bought the supplier.
Oh, wow.
So they still had to buy from China because their competition didn't really want to sell them.
And
the
they couldn't make it happen here in the States?
I mean, in a lot of cases, they'd have to build a plant, so that would add to the cost of the goods as well. So they'd have to weigh the pros and cons of what was the cheapest way to do that. We did have when the solar panels tariff came during Trump's first term, we had one customer that actually changed the plant's location, like built an entire new plant.
Yeah.
And then the tariffs got put on this as well, so that didn't work out quite as well as they thought. But they at least didn't have anti-dumping and countervailing duty. Anti-dumping duty is when there's even more assessed by the Department of Commerce does an investigation, decides that the manufacturer is trying to take over the market in the U.S. by underselling everyone.
Mm-hmm.
There's also countervailing duties, which are when the government, like say the Chinese government, subsidizes a manufacturer so that they can sell stuff
like
at below
steel
market
or
cost.
whatever.
Below market cost, and run the U.S. manufacturers out of business.
Wow.
So.
Wow. And so you're having to keep an eye on all of that.
Mm-hmm.
It did mean though that some people did move onshored their business, and which again, I think it's almost like that's what I'm hearing from the president right now is like, well, you can avoid these tariffs if you move your business to the States. That's what they're saying. But
there's the cost of building the plant to be
Right.
able to build them in the States.
Yeah.
So no matter what, prices are going up. Either the importer's paying that tariff to continue to import it, or they build a plant here and the cost of that plant is going into those
and the
goods.
cost of labor and
Yep.
so on. It's so fascinating. So when we focus on here, and I've got just like a minute before the next break here, there's a lot of raw materials, bolts, components and things, and some of this is pretty high tech stuff that you're bringing into Erie.
Yes.
Both and also. Assembled in Erie and going out the door, right?
Right. So it gets assembled. If it gets assembled in Erie, and the importer's paying tariffs on the parts that come in when they export, because we do have a lot of exporters in Erie. When they export, the countries overseas, whoever's buying them is having to pay tariffs on that export when they import it into their to the other country.
So if it's going to France,
Right.
let's say,
Right.
France is going to charge that tariff.
Yes.
Of the Erie produced product.
Right. So if we're charging, like 25% on the steel that's going into whatever we're exporting to France, and probably Italy is probably better because
okay.
Italy has a lot of steel.
Okay.
They produce a lot of steel. So if we're paying 25% on something that's coming in from Italy and then we sell the finished product to Italy, they're going to charge a retaliatory tariff on whatever that finished good is in order to,
This is when the tariff wars really kick in, don't
the trade
they?
war there.
Wow. All right. We're talking to Gretchen Blough. She is from Logistics Plus here. News is next, and we'll be back in just a bit on Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. Thanks so much for tuning in to Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show live from our Kingdom Financial Group studio here at 5th and State. Gretchen Blough is with us. She's a custom brokerage manager with Logistics Plus Custom Broker Solutions. Again, the subject matter expert when it comes to tariffs. And Gretchen, you talk about this 2-foot wide book of all of the harmonized tariff schedules. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, that's mostly the harmonized tariff schedules, and then there's also all the regulations that have to do with customs entries into the United States, like how things are valued, and like how the different free trade agreements apply, and what's the country of origin, and how that's defined.
So every country of origin has a different trade deal with America, right?
Well, there are some that have trade deals with the U.S. Like there's USMCA. We have one with South Korea. We have one with Australia. There's a bunch more. Please don't ask me to.
Yeah, sure.
off the top of my head.
Right.
But we do have a number of those. But then there's the normal. We call it the normal duty because there's so many tariff rates now that each harmonized tariff schedule is assessed. Okay,
so basically from country X on this product, this is the duty, basically.
Yes.
And it's based generally on a percentage, but sometimes it could be on weight and
right.
Wow.
And there's 2 columns in the harmonized tariff schedule, and one of them's like the normal trading partners, and that's subdivided into everyone that we have a free trade agreement with, and then there's column 2, and that confuses everyone because they're basically sanctioned countries, and you can't import from them anyway. So I don't know why they even said a duty rate for them, but it's there.
And where does like most favored nation stat? I mean, isn't there like
it's
trade
considered
status
that would be the most favored nation status, the column 1.
Gotcha.
And then it's subdivided with all those countries that we have a free trade agreement
so
with.
During let's just face it, during the Biden administration, was tariffs a frequent subject or not really?
It still was a frequent subject because he didn't do away with any of the
Trump tariffs.
Of the Trump tariffs. Everyone was really expecting that he would, and everyone was just like, okay, good, these are going away. And then, he was sworn in, and everyone said, well, wait a second, we still have to pay 25% on this? Yeah.
Wow. So basically, new tariffs kicked in about 8 years ago under Trump. They stayed under Biden. And what was it about the election of Donald Trump the second time that caused the people in the tariff world, the brokerage, the customs world that you're in, to say, I think change is coming? You just kind of, is that because he ran on it, or?
Yeah, he ran on it. He said tariff's a beautiful word, and those of us that work in the industry know better.
Right. Yeah, again, I don't want to be too political, but the people I'm listening to are more on the free market side of things. And so one of the commentators I listen to says, show me where tariffs have worked somewhere since the 19th century. When we were based on, before that we had an income tax and we were based on tariffs, you could actually make something happen with tariffs, but you're talking in the 1800s.
Right.
In this modern economy where it's a global approach to manufacturing and goods, it seems to be too glommed up, doesn't it?
It does. I always make the joke, didn't you watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Ben Stein calls it the Hawley-Smoot Act. Most people call it the Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930. And as he gives his lecture in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, he says that that's what caused the U.S. to sink deeper into the Great Depression.
Were the tariffs that Roosevelt put on, or actually would have been Hoover, right?
Hoover, yeah. And I've seen online a video of Ronald Reagan resurface, where he basically references the Smoot-Hawley Act, and he says that these tariffs subsidize inefficiencies, they reduce competition, so there's no motivation to improve your product. So, that's something I've seen a lot of people post lately.
So Reagan wasn't a big tariff guy.
I mean, he's the one that came up with NAFTA. He helped develop NAFTA. I don't believe he signed it, because the negotiations took so long, but yes.
And so now where we sit is, what are you hearing from your clients? What is the concerns? Are they seeing that their costs of doing business is immediately being impacted?
Yes, and it's the uncertainty. Like the Mexico-Canada tariffs got delayed by a month, and then they started, and then they stopped, and it's almost like, okay, let us know what's going to happen and we can plan for our landed costs. Like, no one wants them, obviously.
Did any of them preload? Did anybody load up on their supplies in anticipation with because if you're talking about bolts and chips,
right. I mean, we did see a lot of people try and get stuff in prior to some of the tariffs taking place, especially steel, because we were talking during the break that there was a quota for the EU and the UK, where on a quarterly basis it would reset. Okay. What happens is they could bring in their steel for duty free until it hit a certain weight in all the ports for all the importers, and then the 25% tariff kicked in. So a lot of times people would put it in a bonded warehouse to avoid, making the entry and paying the duty, because that will delay the process. 3 weeks into the new year, some of those quotas were closed because, people had put it in the bonded warehouse and immediately withdrew it. Okay. So that closed the quota. With the new steel and aluminum tariffs of 25%, there's no exclusions, there's no exemptions. An exclusion is if you apply to the federal government and you say, this product is not made in the United States, I can't source it, you could get an exclusion and it would stay duty-free, but there's nothing like that now.
Wow. And so are we seeing supply chains being glommed up a little bit yet?
There's a lot of confusion because the China-Hong Kong tariff kicked in, and then there was an allowance for an exclusion for if it was on the water when the tariff kicked in, it didn't start yet. It would still, not have that 10% when it first started. Now it's 20%. But the thing is, people sign contracts based on the prices that they purchased stuff for, and if the landed cost shoots up 20%, that type of thing, to adjust that to your end customer, they're not gonna help you out by,
And you think about when you're talking about consumer goods coming from China, for example, you're talking about a couple pennies here and there, and again, if that shot up 25%. What are you going to pay double for your can of shaving cream or whatever?
Yeah, and stuff can be on the water for quite some time.
Sure.
I mean, if there's a lot of ports of call, it can be 8 weeks on the water. It's a little hard to plan when stuff, I was sitting in a meeting today and all of a sudden they're talking about a 200% tariff on champagne and wine.
Yes.
From France. So that from Europe, I think in general.
I think it's for all of Europe.
Yeah, all of Europe. So that's just kind of really hard to stay on top of everything, and the federal websites aren't being updated with all this stuff. We have to wait until it's on the Federal Register. A lot of times you get fact sheets from the different, like the U.S. Trade Representative or whatnot, like this is how it's going to affect you.
Sure. Now
you have to search through the Federal Register, which is all the legal language and everything.
They're not letting you know, okay, here's where we're at today.
No, most of the news I'm getting is from the BBC and the Guardian.
Oh my gosh. Not from your direct sources from the customs.
No, like I'll get it from them first, and that was mostly the Mexico and Canada stuff before all this stuff with Europe started. And so it's just like they don't really have any skin in the game. I mean, granted, Canada's a Commonwealth country, but
Right.
we're getting most of our facts from.
How did it play out during the Trump first term? Did it end up settling down that wouldn't be all these changes that, okay, tariffs are up, but then they're
Yeah, they would
stable.
They were stable and they stayed in place, and it wasn't.
Do you think that's going to happen here?
I hope something stabilizes
Yeah.
because it's just kind of crazy right now. We have certain cases where if something has a percent, the steel tariff that's coming into place is also going into place on more finished goods. Before it was just like the plates and the pipes
Right.
and the
The raw materials, yeah.
like wire and stampings, and that's. So we have a case where we have our China office has a customer that is importing grills. Well, only the steel part of the grill is subject to the steel tariff. So that's subject to the steel tariff. So it has to be broken out almost in a bill of material on the invoice. So you have the HTS code for that. You have the HTS code for the grill in general. You have an HTS code for the China tariff, like the regular China tariff of 25%. You have an HTS code for the China-Hong Kong tariff. So we can have, commodities that have so many tariffs in there. It's like the Da Vinci Code at this point.
Oh my goodness.
So,
wow.
yeah.
And it just means that these costs are going to be passed on to the consumer.
To the consumer, yes. The origin country is not paying it.
No. And so the question is, does it impact sales of that, let's say it's a Erie-based manufacturer that's, getting a big chunk of their grills made in China, and then they add on their stuff, and then they retail it out or wholesale it out. I mean, that's just going to mean it's going to be more expensive, right?
Right. The first time around, right before the tariffs went into effect in 2017, I had a roof on my house that probably had the roofing guy told me that, oh, well, you could probably get 1 or maybe 2 more years out of it. I said, no, I want a metal roof and I want it done now. And this was the whole reason why.
Because of the metal.
Right.
Wow.
So it impacts, homeowners, flooring, that type of thing costs more. So maybe you can't do as many projects around the house. I put in a new furnace this year, and I'm glad I did it before more tariffs took place.
Well, is there any kind of silver lining for you guys as the broker? Because I would imagine you're on a percentage basis too, right?
Well, we charge per entry.
Okay.
But we have a lot of people that are looking to us for consulting purposes. They want us to make sure that everything is classified properly so that they are paying exactly what they should be paying, no more, no less. So we get a lot of phone calls. We get a lot of emails, just general inquiries, because some of the bigger brokers out there, like UPS, FedEx, that type of thing, the national brokers, you have to go through either phone menus or you have to do everything online. You can't talk to a real person. And if you do talk to a real person, it's not a licensed customs broker. Although, my team, even though those of us that aren't licensed are really, really knowledgeable and really, take care to make sure that we help our customers out and make sure that they know what they're in for, and they get the big picture of what things are going to cost and why they're going to cost so much.
It makes a lot of sense. The bottom line is, things will cost more. It sounds like
yes,
there's just
definitely
there's really no way of getting around that.
There's no way of getting around it. I mean, that's a huge increase in either if you're whether you're or not you're importing finished goods or just component parts. And another thing that's being put at risk is what's called the Section 321 entries, which are the low value shipments.
Okay.
and that's like Temu and Wish and that type of
Oh
stuff.
my gosh, and yeah.
That's why a lot of these companies are actually importing everything in a container and warehousing it in the U.S. because if those small packs go away and if you have to file a customs entry on every one of those small packs, and it's the same amount of work as filing an entry on a great big container, your $5 T-shirt is going to cost $150.
Oh my gosh.
So,
yes, right. So, and they're able to kind of navigate that by just putting it into a
They put it
container?
into a container so that all of the, like the customs entry is divided amongst all of those, like if you it's a one line entry because they brought in all the same commodity. Or
I see. They put all of the
Right.
T-shirts in one
container, yes.
as opposed to
all of those
of the
small-
little packs,
Right,
because you're
because all of
direct
those little-
ordering
yeah.
from Temu.
Yeah, all of those little packs would have to have their own
gosh.
customs entry on it, and people don't like when we try and explain that to people. They're like, "What?
Yeah.
No, that's only $2, isn't it? No, not anymore in some cases." So
gosh. Well, I think you got your work cut out for you,
yes,
don't you?
definitely.
Amazing stuff. Again, if I could see where this would lead to, well, I mean, it seems like it's beyond the president using tariffs as a negotiating tool. I think he just really likes tariffs to the point of maybe trying to instill more manufacturing in America, but that kind of manufacture, we're kind of beyond that because we're a global market, and so when we need 1,000 chips in an automobile, those you can't make all those chips in America.
Right.
You can't make all of the tires in America.
Right, and that's
so
what we
on,
saw during COVID when the supply chain was all messed up. There were so many shortages.
That's right. Gretchen Blough, she's a licensed custom broker. She's the manager of the custom brokerage with Logistics Plus. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your expertise. I really appreciate it. It is 4:52.